Welcome to the Officio Spotlight podcast. My name is Simon Lipscomb and thank you very much for listening. Today, my guest on the podcast is Terry Corby. Terry is the founder and chief executive of Good Business Pays, which is an organisation working to encourage the UK's largest companies to fast-track payments to suppliers and particularly smaller suppliers. And as you might guess, it's supplier payments that is the topic for our podcast today. Aside from Good Business Pays, Terry has had many different roles over a long and excelling career, including marketing roles in Sainsbury's and American Express. He was a partner in both Accenture and KPMG, and he's held a number of board and non-executive positions. So Terry, thank you so much for joining me for the conversation today. Payment terms, payment of suppliers will be a topic that's very familiar to the listenership of this podcast, i.e. procurement and supply chain professionals. We should probably start with, why does paying suppliers on time matter?
Well, I think it matters if you want a healthy supply chain, sort of answering it from two ends of the telescope. If you are in a large organization, innovation tends to come from your small or medium-sized suppliers. It doesn't tend to often happen in large organizations on its own. And so in order for you to be at the front of the line to get the latest inventions, the latest thinking from your small suppliers or medium-sized suppliers, you want them to be healthy. You want them to be confident and investing. So you want the cash to flow through to them. That's from one end of the telescope, which is the large organization. From the small organization's perspective, if you've got cash in the bank, you feel confident, you'll invent something new, you'll hire somebody new, you'll move to a new office, you're thinking about growth.
Yeah.
If you haven't got cash or you're waiting for it, you're worrying about paying the bill or which employee you're going to have to lay off next or whether to remortgage the house or the building. So you're not thinking about growth and you're not inventing stuff. So I've just explained, apart from any sort of mental health or physical health reasons for doing it, the business reasons for doing it.
Makes sense, Terry. It might be useful just to put a bit of context behind this topic. How big is the problem of late payments or poor payment practice within the UK market as a starter?
Well, within the UK market, the Federation of Small Businesses, not Good Business Pays, says it's the number one issue that comes up when they talk to small businesses, particularly in the B2B field, not in the consumer field. Okay. But when it comes to B2B, it's the number one issue for small businesses. It puts 50,000 small businesses out of business every year purely down to this issue. And if you assume that every small business has an employee of one, that's one family, or 50,000 families going out. If they have two employees, that's 100,000 families. You can do the math on that and work out this is a big problem in the UK, as it is elsewhere in other countries.
Right. That was my other question, Terry. So how does the UK compare to the rest of the world? Are there some countries that are excellent at this? Where's the UK and other places sit on that league table from your perspective?
The UK is not in a good position compared to other countries. We seem to have built a business culture over probably about 40 or 50 years now of accepting that slow payment or late payment is an acceptable thing to do for a larger company to a smaller one. We've just got into that routine over quite a long period of time. In the European Union, in some countries, it's better or worse than others. In some countries, it's illegal to pay small businesses after 30 days, like the Netherlands. Germany is headed in that direction too. So in Europe, it's a bit different. In Australia and New Zealand, they have the same problem as us. Maybe it's because Brits went out there a long time ago. And in the States, it's a big problem. So if you go on TikTok even, you'll see a lot of freelancers and small businesses saying that they're suffering from late payment problems. Many of those voices are US, American accents. And a lot of that is to do with there's still a lot of paper invoicing in the States, so things take a long time. So it is a problem everywhere. We start with the big companies, because they report their figures in the UK, which is unique to the UK. We're the only country that has a reporting system around big company payment. And also we start with big companies because they have one headquarters and operate in many countries, and their behavior stretches across the world. So if Coca-Cola are doing a crap job at paying in the States, they're doing it in the UK, and they're doing it in Australia. And by the way, yes, they are.
Right. Terry, this might seem an odd question, but in a business to consumer environment, you buy something, you pay for it, right? Cash, check, credit card. How has that culture developed from a B2B perspective? Why is this even something we have to think about?
I think I don't know whether it was ever taught in management schools many years ago that if you tread on the oxygen pipe of someone else, you'll have oxygen and they won't. I'm not sure how that was learned, but I've spoken to finance folk who have said to me that the day they turned up on their first job in finance in a large company, they were given a piece of paper with 10 excuses for not paying the invoices. Yeah. And that was put in a drawer, and it could be everything from the boss is on holiday to I broke my leg or whatever it happens, or you've got the wrong address on it. There would be 10 reasons that they would be asked to use to make sure that the suppliers were paid last and the invoices that company sends out were sent out first in order to bring cash in for as long as possible. Now, that's an old-fashioned attitude. Now, a lot of that has gone away. However, I was on a podcast quite recently with folks from the construction field, and one of the executives on the call said, well, in a recession, isn't it better to hang on to cash? So we know that the attitude of I'm hanging on to cash, even though I'm so it to you, still exists. What I do find, I'm painting a pretty grim picture here, but what I do find is that when I talk to CEOs of large companies, and that is something I spend quite a lot of time doing, it's clear to me that they don't have a bunch of senior executives sitting there thinking, how do we put small businesses out of business? Yeah. In fact, their office is so far away from the accounts department, the procurement department, the accounts payable folk. It's so far away that they're not aware, usually, of the payment terms that might be harming small or medium-sized businesses, and their intention is not to do that. Very often it's just something that gets forgotten, and we're trying to make sure it doesn't get forgotten.
And how are you doing that, Terry? So you have this issue. As you said, I think, targeting big companies, certainly initially. How are you trying to change this behaviour? Because it must be an enormously complicated topic with tens of thousands of affected parties. How are you trying to address that?
It's complicated and simple, actually, at the same time. You get work done on your house at home. You decide when to pay the builder. It's the same in a company. Somebody decides how fast they're going to pay. Yes, there are lots of systems there to change and processes and what have you, but it ultimately comes down to a very few senior people at the top of a company, which is the principle of how fast we're going to pay. Now, in this country, in the UK, as I mentioned earlier on, uniquely, we collect payment data from those, or we don't actually, the Department of Business and Trade. The government collects data from companies every 6 months on their payment terms. Okay. This was an initiative introduced back in 2017 by the then Small Business Commissioner, a chap called Philip King, who is one of our own non-executive directors these days. Right. And that regulation set out that all large companies should report their payment performance every 6 months to the government. That data has always been there, but nobody's really taken any notice of it. So what we decided to do was take that data, have some fun with it, make it easy to understand and fun to use and look at, put it on our website, goodbusinesspays.com. You can go there and you can look up the name of the company you're interested in and see how fast they pay or how late they pay. All our information is free and always will be for people to use. And so we've used a lot of data that we've collected from there. And then we've gone on to public sector organisations like local authorities, NHS Trust, police forces, and made that available. So what we're trying to do, on the one hand, is to make information easy to understand, easy to get, so that people see what the situation is. And then on the other hand, in terms of the change journey and trying to affect change, we use that data to create insights around what good looks like. So we might provide awards to companies that pay very fast, insights around what bad looks like. When companies pay slowly, we put them on the naughty step list, or we call them out in the newspaper or on a podcast, as I did earlier on. And that affects people. That makes people change. Nobody wants to be called out for bad behavior. Everybody wants to have good behavior called out because it's a great CSR thing, a great ESG thing. So we're shining the light on the dark and the light, and over time we're getting a lot of good results.
If you took one of the examples, perhaps start with a positive of an organisation that you've engaged with that has really grasped this topic. Could you just talk me through your perception of their journey, where they are now as an organisation, what they would say about the positives of this, and particularly in a potentially recessionary environment with high inflation. How do you tackle that? Or holding on to money is a good, from your construction executive position?
I think there's a water company called United Utilities. They may not do everything brilliantly, right? So not talking about whether they put nasty stuff in the river. I mean, can't solve all the
Just
problems.
payments, yes,
Well,
absolutely.
right?
This is just about
As it
payments.
relates to as it relates to payments. So what you have is a water supplier in the northwest of England who supplies a bunch of customers who don't have a choice as to who to buy their water from, right? So they have to work hard to please those customers, or else those customers are going to be very unhappy. Now, that water company, you can imagine in the winter time, when you've had a lot of rain, as we've had this winter, there's a lot of water leaks and what have you. They rely on an enormous amount of contractors and subcontractors and suppliers to come out, say, on Christmas morning when they've had a phone call saying there's a problem, to fix that problem fast. They have paid their suppliers within, I think, 11 days for the past 7 years without hesitation. And when COVID struck, they realized that their suppliers might struggle even more, their smaller suppliers. So they decided to pay them up front before they'd actually done any work for them, and said, well, we can see you're going to ask you to do work every month, so we're going to pay you up front, almost like a retainer.
Yeah.
When you get a phone call from United Utilities, say, can you turn up Christmas morning to fix that problem, who's going to be there for them? Those subcontractors are going to treat that company best first, and therefore United Utilities customers paying their water bills are very happy because they're getting things sorted very, very quickly. That is an example from utilities. NatWest Bank are probably the number one in terms of best payments to suppliers overall. They have a very sophisticated system where payment, and they have several different companies, right? It's just NatWest Bank. They have Coots and they have Royal Bank of Scotland and many different, but all of the board directors are asked about payment performance in their sector at every board meeting as part of the normal course of business. They've decided from the top that payment of suppliers is going to be a big priority for them because they want their small suppliers bringing all the innovation to them. The executives are marked down or marked up on the basis of, are they hitting certain targets? And when that filters through from the CEO of a bank subsidiary through to finance and procurement, that allows those executives to make different decisions about how we prioritize payments to certain groups of customers. The leading procurement folks, SIP's leadership told me last year, they know exactly why they should pay fast, what customer of choice means, what it means to have a healthy, sustainable supply chain, but they need the support from the people up above them.
Yeah.
In order to implement the kind of changes that would mean. And NatWest have been doing it for years. United Utilities have been doing it for years, and they will tell you the benefits of that.
That was my next question, Terry. So if I was to go or someone was to go and talk to the chief executive of NatWest, they would tangibly talk about this. They would see this as a huge benefit to their organisation taking this position.
Yes, it's the chief executive at the bank that supports Good Business Pays personally, and always has been, because they see the value of their supply chain. They see them as an extension of their capability. And you wouldn't pay your employees 6 months late. They stop coming to work. So why would you do that for your suppliers, which are your own capability too?
Yeah. What's the difference when you go and talk to an organisation that you find frustratingly poor on this topic? What is their justification for not taking the NatWest approach or the United Utilities approach?
Well, to be fair, there are some that have got a rotten technology from, maybe they bought lots of companies and now they've got 4 or 5 different types of technology. Things don't talk to each other. So their systems and processes don't link up properly.
Yeah.
Not a brilliant excuse, but an excuse that I've heard. So that's the excuse where I find things can be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
You might find companies that say, well, we can't identify small companies because, how do we know what number of employees they've got? So I would say to them, make a proxy. Just pay all bills under 100K in 30 days and you'll sweep up most of them. And then you have all 20-year systems. Those kind of problems can be solved where there's a will. Right? There are some companies, less in number now, that just don't care.
Okay.
That just use it as a bargaining chip. Normally, when we're going to publish a list of slow payers or late payers, I would write to the CFO 3 months before and say to them, you're going to be on this list because, and here are your figures. Are they right? Giving them the chance of right to reply before we publish that.
Yeah.
And I've had many difficult conversations, as you can imagine, including one CFO that called me to their Zoom meeting And the first thing they said was, Terry, you're the only person that cares about this.
Okay.
So we have that. We have another that says, well, we're quite happy with our 90-day payment terms. We're proud of that. And those companies, there are about 10% of companies that will always behave badly.
Yeah.
And we sort of forget them. We just put them on the naughty list and they're there. There are about 10% that do a brilliant job, but there's 80% in the middle. That's the ones that will swing either way. And those are the good ones to work on.
And Terry, is presumably part of the challenge for you on this topic that you mentioned about the big companies having to report, but presume lots of companies therefore don't have to report, and presumably the ones that are very poor at this are even less keen on being open and transparent with data. Like, is that a challenge you face?
Yeah, it is. And in fact, since we existed, less and less companies are reporting that should be, because number one, it's a pain in the backside to collect all this complicated information. You send it into DBT. No one really knew it was there in the first place. And then Good Business Pays calls you out for bad behavior. What's the incentive for there's no enforcement from government, right? If you don't. So that's changing, right? So now we're working with DBT and they're starting to enforce. So number one, companies that should report be made to report. Otherwise, the company and its directors are all liable. You're then right, though, because underneath that 10,000 companies, it's only 10,000 that have to report.
Yeah.
Another, couple of million that are medium-sized companies that don't have to report. That's the Wild West.
Yeah.
Small business, that's the Wild, Wild West. And so we are currently figuring out, with the help of some clever people, how we use kind of nudge strategies to encourage good behavior at that lower level, because a lot of slow payment, late payment comes from small to small or medium to small. And we're thinking that perhaps something like Trustpilot or similar, where, you say to me, what is your policy on payment? I say it's 30 days or 60 or 90 or 10, whatever it is. And then I get feedback from my suppliers as to how good a job I've done. Something that encourages people to be a self-policing network, eBay style thing might work. But you're right, it's going to be difficult. However, it's like drink driving and seatbelt wearing. If the big companies that are the worst behaving ones set the example and we've got the right stuff in place, we might stand a chance of getting something done.
Yeah. One of my questions, I was thinking about our audience perspectives they might have on this topic. So again, procurement supply chain people often negotiating with suppliers. It's the job title. What's your perspective on payment terms being used as a negotiation lever? Should that even happen? I mean, should it be gone as an option even, right?
It can play a part. So I do quite a lot of sessions for small businesses around, how to avoid problems like this. And one of the things that they ask is about, can they ever accept slightly longer payment terms, for instance? And of course, the answer is, it depends on their business model, right? When they have to buy lots of goods in and they're sitting on them for 6 months before they pass them on. So it depends on that. But if a customer said to you, well, I'll tell you what, we would like to pay you in 60 rather than 30 days, for example, we would advise the small or medium-sized supplier to ask for something in return. Can I have a longer contract? Can I have first dibs at something? Or if you're going to give me notice of, not supplying anymore, can I have a year rather than 6 months to find another customer? Try and get a bargaining chip yourself that makes it worth it and protects your business. So I think there is room for that, but I still believe that, once you've gone beyond, say, 60 days, for example, it just feels wrong to make someone wait that long for services provided. So there's room for it, but it's got to be a two-way conversation, a partnership, rather than a big company forcing a small company to do something.
And Terry, right at the start of the conversation, you talked about how this topic is important to bring innovation into organisations' own respective supply chains, kind of expanding that out at a macro level. Let's just talk UK for now because it will get unbearably complicated. But is the UK government, for example, taking this topic seriously enough? And if they embraced it more, could they create more innovation, more healthy supply bases?
I think they're taking it seriously. Yes, I would say both parties. So when we talk about government, whoever it is, they're both taking it seriously. When we started this thing, I think they'd sort of felt like they'd given up on it because they weren't really talking about it. But the 2017 regulations regulations, which were due to come to an end in 2024, have been extended till 2031. There's been a review of those current regulations, which you can find on the government website, which means they're toughening things up. They're getting tougher on enforcement. They're trying to understand, they being government, the best role for government to play versus third sector or private organisations. If Labour get in, the rules are likely to get stronger. So, for example, it's likely that you're going to have to report your payment stuff in the annual report and accounts.
Yeah.
The prompt payment code is going to be rejigged. The small business commissioner's role is going to be expanded. So, yeah, I think whether it's Labour or Conservative, they're both taking it very seriously. And we're seeing actions that demonstrate it's beyond just words.
And Terry, just conscious of time, so it probably needs to be my last question. Assuming that we are both right now talking to our listeners who are procurement supply chain professionals in international businesses in the public and private sector, what is the one thing you would leave them with? What is the one thing that you think they should do around this topic?
Well, if they are a procurement professional in a larger organisation, I think they should talk to their bosses about the benefits of paying suppliers faster. It may sound an odd thing for them to be talking about, but the direction of travel from a win perspective is in this direction. So you better get with it because it's going to come your way anyway. So why not start talking about what you can get out of it, make out of it, new products, new services, new innovation, as opposed to an extra few pence saved this month. I think that's the conversation to now start having. And by the way, I mean, Direct Line Insurance, for instance, who are a brilliant and wonderful payer, they've won our award for fast payment 3 times now. And they've written to me twice to say, are we going to win the award because we want it in the annual report, right? So if you look at many of the things that in sustainability that companies have to do to become net zero or whatever, they're quite hard things to do. Paying suppliers fast is an easy thing to do if you've got the will.
Yeah.
You can put it straight in the annual report and you can figure out how much money's gone to the bottom line and into the system, and everybody will love you for it.
Terry, that feels like a perfect place to draw the conversation to conclusion. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been fascinating to learn more about this. When we publish this podcast, we'll put a link to your website. We'll encourage listeners to go there, look at your data, look at the information themselves. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give us a click on the follow button on your chosen podcast platform. We'd also love to hear your views on either future topics or indeed if you've got any thoughts on future guests that we should look to get onto the podcast. Thanks again. See you next time.